shamans have done is they're very intelligent. They've really used their brains and they've really worked things out. And they've realised that if we are multidimensional beings and there's an infinity of possibility out there, what it might be helpful to do is to start to map that and to come up with some consensus and some agreement so we can actually operate successfully and effectively. So in order to make this happen, what the shamans do is they talk about three worlds: the upper world, the middle world and the lower world. I'll talk about them in reverse order and begin with the lower world. If you want to go for healing for a client, then you're going to be taking yourself and your guides with you to the lower world. And in your active imagination you can choose an infinity of ways to do this. You could literally envisage an escalator going into the ground. You could imagine a lift. You could see a tunnel. You could find yourself going down the roots of a tree. Or you could just see the ground opening up. Or you could just feel your consciousness sinking into the ground. It doesn't matter how you get there, but the idea is you're travelling down, down, down into the earth, underground. And when you arrive at your destination, it looks in a very particular way. Every person is going to see things in a different way. There's definitely no doubt about that. This is where I met my guides for a lot of my healing work. It's possible to very easily encounter any lost soul parts from the person by travelling to the lower world. So that's the primary purpose. Now the thing to explain to you, a slight bit of controversy, is to do with religion. Certain religions talk about heaven and hell. So basically the lower world was demonized and words like hell were used. It was supposed to be inhabited by beings like the devil. My experience of working in the lower world is all a load of nonsense, and in fact the lower world is a very wonderful and powerful healing space. So that's what the lower world is about. It's about going for healing, going to find lost soul parts and going with your guides. Now by contrast, the upper world is a very different experience. It's about visualizing any method of traveling upwards, whether it might be climbing a tree, going up an escalator, up a lift, or just floating up into the sky. My favourite actually is just to find myself instantly out in the cosmos, surrounded by stars and galaxies, and to be right out there with my upper world guide. I have a very special and particular guide to the upper world, and so if I'm going to the upper world, I'm going for a different purpose. The reason to go to the upper world usually is to go to meet the higher self of the client. Now I'd better give a little explanation about this. Every human being on planet Earth at the moment is basically a soul, and what we have is we have 25% or a quarter of the soul is inhabiting this physical body. The other 75% inhabits the higher self. Now some people like to look at the higher self as being up there. I like to look at the higher self as being out here. So the thing about the higher self is it's not limited by space in the way that the physical self is. And the idea is that the human being is 1/4 physical self, 3/4 higher self. So if a person has got problems in their life and they want some advice, the best person to go to for advice is yourself. So what the shaman does is the shaman goes with their guides to the upper world and they meet the higher self of the client. And what happens to me is I get ready to draw metaphorical breath to ask the questions the client's got prepared. And of course the higher self has been waiting, usually for ages, for the person to get round to doing something about connecting, and is, shall I say, somewhat impatient. So the higher self of that client usually goes blah 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 and has all these things that they want me to give to the client. And when it's all written down, I thank the person's higher self very much for the connection and the experience, and I then say to the client, okay, this is what we've got for you, so here's the information. So that's the upper world. It's primarily travelling into the cosmos to meet the person's higher self, to get practical answers to the person's questions. That's not all it's about. There are other aspects of the upper world as well. It can enable the shaman to travel to places which are completely outside of space and time. I have on rare occasions had experiences of working with a client, and I've been taken to dimensions which I have, and I have to be very particular about the words I use here, because what I have to say to you is I've travelled to dimensions I can't assemble. Now when I say that, what I mean to say is that the way I'm able to assemble this reality into seeing this is my hand and that is my jumper and this is the grass growing, is using my senses. I can assemble the information that my senses feed my consciousness, and I perceive the grass, the sky, the hands, the jumper. That's what I do. If I wasn't able to assemble any of this information, I wouldn't be able to make sense of any of it. Now when I entered this particular dimension with all my guides, I discovered to my great surprise that not only could I not assemble any of it, in other words, we couldn't make sense of anything we were perceiving, neither could they. But luckily for us, we had 4 helpers with us who are inhabiting a location way outside this galaxy, and they can do things that even my guides wouldn't have a clue what to do. So this was the first time my guides and I had been outside of any reality we could assemble, and so what they did is they used some very special technology which they then switched on, and all of a sudden we were able to assemble what we couldn't comprehend into something we could comprehend. I'll tell you, it was weird enough even then, and it enabled us to rescue a particular soul part from a client that had got lost, not on this planet, not in this galaxy, not even in this dimension at all. We had to go way outside. So that was a particularly amazing and rare experience. So there we've got the lower world generally for healing, the upper world generally for advice from the person's higher self. That leaves the middle world. The middle world is as follows. It's the most dangerous place a shaman can go to, and no trainee or apprentice shaman should ever consider going there until their teacher is confident that they're able to do so, which means they are tooled up with a really good collection of guides and they know exactly what they're doing, because the middle world is a place you can go where you could get seriously lost. You could get seriously screwed up by going there without knowing what you're doing. Because the middle world is where black magicians do hideous things to people who have been unfortunate enough to have such people cross their paths. So it does happen, I'm sure you've heard about it, you've heard of voodoo practitioners and other practitioners whereby people put a curse on someone. Sometimes people, they lose their will to live, they fade away, they get a mysterious illness that the hospitals can't diagnose and they die. That's an example of what I call really dodgy black magic. People who've experienced black magic and who have suffered from that, if they're fortunate, they will eventually think to contact a shaman. The shaman will travel, tooled up with their guides, to the middle world, and that's where they will find what's been going on. They will find the dark practitioners doing their ugly trade. They will find the damaging entities which are attacking that person, and they will give them no quarter. They will deal with everything as quickly as possible. And the really gratifying thing about this particular work is what the shaman ends up doing is they end up liberating the negative energies, for want of a better word, that's causing the person all that suffering, and they free them and they let them go to their own heaven. So the work is actually done with love. Not every practitioner does that. Some actually get into the idea of combat and they see it all as a big war game. It's far more effective and far more enlightened to actually work with love, and that's the way that I work with my guides. So if we have got a person who comes to us, one of the clients came to me who was being seriously affected by a tarot reader stroke magician. This person lived in a different country, a European country outside of Britain, and when we did the work there we could see the person was being very badly attacked by a lot of negative energies, and we were able to sort them out straight away and able to send them to where they actually want to go. And this is one of the really big mysteries about working with what people call the energies, negative energies, entities, whatever you like to call them, demons. People use all these different words. And my big revelation was that these demons are doing these horrible things, giving these people suffering, because they're only doing what they can to try to get free and go home. So the great thing about this particular work for a shamanic practitioner is you're freeing the client and they feel wonderful, they feel like $1 million. but also you're actually freeing the entities that have been possessing them as well, and allowing them to go to their own heaven. So there you have it, the middle world only for those who are really experiencing what they're doing, the lower world for healing, and the upper world for advice and guidance.